Mark Hensley was the football star everyone adored, but it was his wife, Laura, who uncovered the shocking secret that destroyed everything. An affair not with a stranger, but with his own half-sister, Clara, a betrayal so twisted it ended his career and shattered their perfect life forever. Mark Hensley was the kind of man everyone admired, the golden boy who seemed destined for greatness. From the moment he first stepped onto a professional football pitch, his future looked secure. His natural talent, speed, and power made him a standout, and within a few years, he was the name everyone shouted in stadiums across the country. His story was perfect. The working-class boy who had worked tirelessly, now playing for the top league, earning money most people could only dream of. Alongside him was Laura, his wife, who seemed to complete the picture. Together, they represented everything people wanted to believe about love, success, and dreams fulfilled. Whenever cameras caught them together, Laura always had a smile that spoke of loyalty, and Mark's casual hand on her back told the world he was proud to have her. They were featured in glossy magazines and sports interviews as the ultimate power couple. Life in their suburban home was polished and enviable. The house stood behind tall hedges, with manicured lawns and gleaming cars in the driveway. Laura played the role of the elegant, supportive wife seamlessly, attending charity galas, organizing family gatherings, and standing by the sidelines during matches. Mark often credited her for his stability, saying she kept him grounded when the fame and constant attention threatened to overwhelm him. Fans adored her almost as much as they did him. She represented the normal life he supposedly never let go of, even while he was earning millions. But behind the smiles and flawless images, Laura began noticing small changes that unsettled her. They were easy to dismiss at first. Mark was busier, often claiming he had to stay longer after practice or attend meetings she wasn't invited to. He had always been dedicated to the sport, and with his rising career, extra training hours didn't seem unusual. Yet, his absences stretched into late nights, and he seemed distracted even when he was home. She would find him scrolling through his phone with an intensity that suggested something secretive. When she asked, he would wave it off, saying he was checking team updates or contract details. The little things began to stack up, each one a brick in the wall of unease building inside her. There were new colognes she didn't recognize on his clothes, receipts for dinners in places she had never been, and unexplained hotel charges that didn't match his football schedule. Laura told herself not to jump to conclusions. Wives of athletes were warned constantly about the pressures of fame and how suspicion could ruin marriages if not handled carefully. She wanted to believe Mark was simply overwhelmed and hiding the stress to protect her from worry. After all, he had always been the man she trusted, the man who had promised her a life of honesty. Yet the nagging feeling wouldn't leave her. At night, when Mark slept soundly beside her, Laura lay awake replaying the inconsistencies over and over. She noticed how he guarded his phone like a priceless possession, never leaving it unattended. He would step outside to take calls in hushed tones, often returning with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. When she asked who had called, the answer was always vague: teammates, sponsors, agents. It was never specific and never satisfying. The perfect image she once believed in started to crumble in her mind. She found herself wondering if she had been blinded by the glamour, if she had allowed the illusion of a fairy tale marriage to cover up warning signs. Neighbors still waved at them as though they were the ideal couple, but Laura's heart carried the weight of doubt. The applause from stadium crowds no longer sounded like pride to her. It echoed hollow, a reminder that everyone admired a man she was beginning to suspect she didn't really know. Laura tried to push aside her concerns, telling herself every relationship had rough patches. But the harder she tried to ignore it, the more glaring the evidence became. His excuses didn't add up, and his distance grew. She started noticing a name, Clara, that appeared occasionally on his phone, quickly dismissed as just a friend or extended family. Something about it gnawed at her. Why would her husband be so secretive about calls from a family member? Why was her name whispered instead of spoken openly? The unease became part of Laura's daily life. When she stood by the sidelines at games, smiling for cameras, she felt the sting of doubt under her skin. The life that once looked like a dream now felt like a trap, built on something unstable. She could sense that a secret was lurking, waiting to break free. And though she didn't yet know the scale of it, she knew it was only a matter of time before the truth would surface. She held on to the hope that perhaps it was nothing, perhaps stress and paranoia were clouding her mind. But deep down, Laura knew she was standing on the edge of something devastating, something that would not only destroy her marriage, but also shatter the image the world had of their perfect life. The whispers of suspicion in her head grew louder. And though she couldn't yet name it, she knew her husband's secret would one day explode into the open. Laura's instincts sharpened in the weeks that followed. She had always trusted her intuition, and now it screamed at her that something was wrong. The name Clara kept appearing like a shadow in places it didn't belong. At first, she thought it was coincidence. A number saved under that name flashed when Mark's phone lit up late at night. It appeared in small, almost hidden entries in his call history. Sometimes she caught him typing with a small smile on his face, only for him to quickly turn the screen away when she entered the room. He dismissed it each time, saying she was being too suspicious, but his avoidance only fueled her doubt. Digging quietly, Laura learned Clara wasn't just another friend or colleague. Clara was Mark's half-sister, born from his father's brief relationship before marrying Mark's mother. Laura had met her once, briefly, at a family wedding years ago. Clara had seemed polite but distant, the kind of relative who appeared on the edges of gatherings, but never stayed long enough to be remembered. She was rarely mentioned in conversations with Mark's family, and Laura had never given her a second thought, until now. What unsettled her most was that Mark had never spoken openly about keeping in touch with Clara, not once in their years of marriage. Yet suddenly, there she was, quietly present in his life again. The connection nagged at Laura. Why was Mark hiding conversations with his half-sister? Why the secrecy, the late-night texts, the unexplained trips out of town? She told herself, maybe Clara needed his help. Maybe there was some private family matter Mark wasn't ready to share. But her heart whispered a darker possibility. She began paying attention to Mark's excuses with a sharper eye. When he said he was staying late at practice, she checked his schedule. When he claimed to be at meetings, she looked for mentions online or in emails. Again and again, his words didn't match the facts. Her unease grew into quiet investigation. She started noticing patterns in his movements. There were weekends when he said he was traveling with the team, but no games were scheduled. There were charges on his credit card from hotels in nearby towns. Each discovery was a piece of a puzzle she didn't want to complete, but couldn't stop working on. The more she looked, the more she realized this wasn't the kind of affair most wives feared. Something about it felt twisted, dangerous. If it were another woman, she could confront him, grieve, and move on. But Clara's presence made everything darker. The possibility haunted her. The idea that her husband, the man she loved, could be involved with his own half-sister was almost too horrible to consider. She wanted to dismiss it as paranoia, as her mind playing cruel tricks. Yet the signs kept multiplying. A hotel receipt tucked carelessly into his jacket pocket matched a night he swore he had been away for training. A message preview she glimpsed before he snatched the phone away contained a phrase far too intimate to be exchanged between siblings. Laura felt trapped in a nightmare she couldn't share with anyone. How could she tell friends or family that she suspected her husband of something so unthinkable? Even speaking the words aloud seemed impossible. Instead, she carried the secret in silence, a heavy weight pressing down on her. In public, she smiled for cameras and waved to fans, but inside her heart pounded with fear of the truth. Her suspicions soon became unbearable. She started following his movements from a distance, making excuses to see where he went. Once, she drove past a hotel where his car was parked outside, though he had told her he was at practice. Another time, she noticed Clara's name on the guest list for an event in a neighboring city, an event Mark had conveniently claimed he had to attend alone. The coincidences piled higher, each one confirming her darkest fears. Every piece of evidence whispered the same message. This wasn't a simple betrayal. It was a secret relationship that defied reason and morality. And Mark had hidden it masterfully, using his career as a shield, the chaos of fame as a perfect excuse. To the world, he was a hero on the field, but to Laura, he was a stranger slipping deeper into a forbidden life she couldn't fully understand at 18 night. As she lay awake, Laura's mind spiraled. She pictured them together, imagined conversations she wasn't meant to hear, and felt her chest tighten with both anger and heartbreak. She still wanted answers, still clung to a thread of hope that there was some innocent explanation. But deep down, she knew the truth was darker than she had ever imagined when she first married him. The picture-perfect life they had built was a facade, one that was beginning to crack at the edges. Laura could feel it breaking, and though she didn't yet know how, she sensed the moment was coming when the hidden truth would finally shatter everything in its path. Laura's growing certainty that something was terribly wrong pushed her to take a step she never thought she would. She had lived her life trying to believe in trust, loyalty, and patience, but trust was no longer enough. She needed proof. Without it, she risked being dismissed as paranoid, or worse, being manipulated into silence by Mark's easy charm and excuses. Determined, she contacted a private investigator. It felt like betrayal in itself, paying a stranger to follow her husband. But her instincts told her this was the only way to uncover the truth. The investigator worked discreetly. Within days, Laura received her first report, a small envelope that made her hands shake before she even opened it. Inside were photographs of Mark leaving a hotel late at night with Clara by his side. The two walked close, their bodies angled toward each other in a way that spoke of intimacy, not family. Another set of photos showed them dining together in a quiet restaurant, their heads bent close, his hand resting on hers across the table. Laura's chest tightened as she stared at the images. Each one was a knife, cutting into the illusions she had fought to hold on to. The report went beyond photographs. There were receipts collected from hotels and restaurants, all in Mark's name, linked to weekends he had told Laura he was away for training. The investigator included details of phone records, late-night calls, and frequent text exchanges. With Clara, there was no mistaking it. This wasn't innocent. This wasn't family reconciliation or some misunderstood bond. It was exactly what Laura had feared but had been too horrified to admit. An affair, hidden under the pretense of sibling ties. Her world shifted as she absorbed the evidence. She had imagined many possibilities before, but the truth was heavier than anything she had prepared for. She thought of the years she had stood by his side, the sacrifices she had made to support his career, the way she had trusted him without hesitation. And all along, he had been living a double life, one not only rooted in betrayal, but in something that would destroy them both if it ever came to light. Laura could not share the discovery with anyone. To speak it aloud would make it real in a way she wasn't ready for. Even the investigator, who had seen many cases of infidelity, had delivered the report with a quiet heaviness, as if aware this situation carried a darkness beyond ordinary scandal. Laura kept the folder hidden in a locked drawer, away from prying eyes, but she returned to it again and again, as though torturing herself with the evidence might make her stronger. Each photograph, each line of text, etched itself into her memory. Mark, meanwhile, carried on as though nothing had changed. He smiled for cameras, played matches with his usual brilliance, and returned home with the easy charm that had always won her over. To outsiders, he was untouchable, adored by fans, a model of discipline and talent. But Laura now saw him differently. Every time he left the house with a casual excuse, she wondered if he was running into Clara's arms. Every smile he gave her seemed rehearsed, a mask to hide the life he was desperate to protect. Laura began noticing the subtler signs she had once ignored. The faint scent of perfume on his clothes, not hers. The tired but satisfied expression he carried after certain nights. The way he became defensive, even angry, if she asked too many questions. It was all there, written across his face, and she wondered how she had missed it for so long. Her heartbreak slowly hardened into resolve. She was no longer searching for proof, she had it. Now she was searching for answers. Why had he risked everything? Why Clara? Was it love, lust, or manipulation? She didn't know, but she intended to find out. The secrecy, the lies, the careful hiding of their relationship, it all pointed to something more than just an impulsive mistake. This had been planned, nurtured, sustained over time. Every day that passed with the knowledge hidden inside her was unbearable. She felt herself living in two worlds. The one the public saw, where she was the graceful wife of a celebrated footballer, and the one only she knew, where her marriage was rotting from the inside out. She thought about confronting him, screaming the truth into his face, but she held back. If she was going to expose this, she wanted to do it in a way he couldn't deny, in a way the whole world would see. The folder of evidence grew thicker as she continued collecting more. Hotel receipts, printouts of messages, photographs, and bank transfers formed a damning record of his betrayal. Each piece was another layer of armor for her, preparing her for the moment when the confrontation would come. But even as she gathered the truth, she felt the weight of secrecy pulling her down. Living in the shadow of what she knew was suffocating, but she couldn't stop now. For Laura, there was no turning back. She had crossed the line from suspicion to certainty, from heartbreak to resolve. What lay ahead was unclear, but one thing was certain. The life she thought she had built with Mark was already gone. All that remained was to decide how to tear down the illusion in a way that would leave no room for denial. The truth was no longer hidden, not from her, and soon it would not be hidden from anyone else. The moment of reckoning came when Laura decided she could no longer carry the weight of silence. Weeks of sleepless nights, endless replaying of photographs in her mind, and the constant dread of living alongside a man she no longer recognized had brought her to this breaking point. She knew Mark valued his public image more than anything. The football field was his sanctuary, the stadium his stage, and the crowd's cheers his lifeblood. His career was built not just on talent, but on reputation. If there was one way to strike at the heart of his double life, it was to expose the truth in front of the very people who worshipped him. The opportunity came in the form of a celebratory dinner hosted by his club after a string of victories. The room would be filled with teammates, managers, sponsors, and members of the press, people whose opinions carried weight, people who defined his professional standing. Laura dressed elegantly. That evening, her outward appearance as calm and polished as ever. But inside, her heart pounded with a mix of fear and resolve. She carried the folder of evidence with her, every page carefully arranged. The night began as expected. Speeches were made, glasses were raised, and Mark basked in the glow of admiration. He laughed easily, shaking hands, playing the role of the adored star. Laura watched him closely, seeing the charm she had once fallen for, now twisted into a mask she could barely stand to look at. Her turn came when the microphone was offered to her, a gesture meant for the supportive wife to say a few words. She stood, her hands steady though her chest ached, and she opened the folder. The room fell silent as photographs and documents slid across the table. At first, confusion flickered across faces, but it quickly turned into shock as the images made their meaning clear. There was Mark, embracing Clara outside a hotel, his hand on hers in an intimate dinner, records of nights spent together when he was supposed to be away for training. The evidence spoke for itself, louder than any words Laura could have uttered. Gasps rippled through the room, followed by a suffocating silence. Mark's face drained of color. For a man who thrived under pressure on the field, he now sat frozen, stripped of control. His teammates exchanged uneasy glances, sponsors whispered furiously, and managers stared in disbelief. The story spread almost instantly beyond that room. Within hours, tabloids carried the scandal, plastering his fall from grace across headlines. The betrayal wasn't just an affair. It was an affair with his half-sister, something the public could neither forgive nor forget. The fallout was swift and merciless. Sponsors withdrew their deals, not wanting their brands tied to such disgrace. The club issued statements distancing themselves from him, while fans who once chanted his name now shouted it with anger and disgust. Commentators dissected the scandal endlessly, speculating on how long it had been hidden and what it meant for his legacy. The career he had built with such discipline crumbled almost overnight. Clara, caught in the storm, vanished from sight. The press hunted for her, desperate for interviews, but she disappeared before they could find her. The scandal carried her name as much as Mark's, dragging her into the center of a firestorm she could no longer control. Whether she chose to hide or was forced into silence, Laura didn't know, but her absence only deepened the mystery. Laura herself became a focal point. The woman who had uncovered the truth, who had chosen not to protect her husband's secrets, was both admired and pitted. Some praised her bravery, while others whispered about the humiliation she must have endured for years. She ignored the noise. Her purpose had been clear: to expose Mark and end the facade. Filing for divorce was her next step, a decision she made without hesitation. Papers were served quickly, severing her ties to him in every way possible. But, even with her decisive actions, the aftermath took its toll. The home they had shared felt hollow, filled with memories that now seemed tainted. She moved through its rooms like a stranger, haunted by the laughter and promises that had once filled them. At night, the silence pressed on her, reminding her that although she had freed herself, the scars of betrayal would remain. Mark, stripped of his glory, faced not just personal ruin, but legal scrutiny. Investigators dug into his finances and his connections to Clara, questioning whether there had been elements of blackmail or coercion involved. The more they uncovered, the more tangled his secret life appeared. What had started as whispers of infidelity exploded into a public dissection of his private sins. Laura watched from a distance as the man she had once loved unraveled. There was no satisfaction in it, only a hollow sense of finality. She had exposed him, but the truth came with a cost. The image of their perfect life was gone forever, replaced by a scandal that would be remembered long after the headlines faded. The story was no longer just theirs. It had become a cautionary tale told in living rooms and locker rooms alike. That by the time the dust settled, one thing was clear. Mark's downfall was irreversible. He had built his life on fame, on the adoration of crowds, and now he was left with nothing but disgrace. Laura had lost a husband, but she had regained herself. The truth had destroyed everything they once had, but in that destruction, she found the strength to step forward alone, no longer chained to the lies that had bound her to. In the weeks that followed the public exposure, the scandal refused to die down. Every newspaper, every television broadcast, every social media feed seemed to echo with Mark's name and the shocking truth that had come crashing down on him. What had once been adoration was now ridicule and disgust. Fans who had once proudly worn his jersey burned it in the streets. Stadiums that had erupted in cheers at his arrival now echoed with chants of betrayal. The fall from grace was complete, but the story had more to unravel than anyone expected. Laura, now living separately, tried to build a quiet life away from the chaos. She had filed for divorce immediately after exposing him, cutting ties without hesitation. Yet even in her new solitude, she could not escape the storm. Journalists lingered outside her home, desperate for comments, desperate to pull new details from the woman who had dared to reveal what others could never have imagined. She ignored them, retreating into silence. But inside, she was still haunted. It wasn't enough to have exposed Mark. She wanted to understand how such a life of deception had been crafted right under her nose. The answers began to emerge when financial investigators released their findings. Bank records showed repeated transfers from Mark to Clara over several years. The amounts were substantial, far beyond the kind of help a brother might offer a sister. These weren't casual gifts or family support. They were deliberate, structured payments that pointed to something darker. The suggestion was clear. Clara had been receiving money in exchange for her silence. Whether through manipulation or blackmail, Mark had been funneling his wealth into keeping her quiet, ensuring their secret relationship remained hidden from the public eye. This revelation shifted the scandal once more. For some, it painted Clara as the one pulling strings, holding her half-brother in a grip of coercion. For others, it was evidence of how far Mark had gone to protect something forbidden, willing to risk financial ruin just to maintain the affair. The payments revealed that this wasn't a fleeting lapse in judgment, but a calculated deception that had been sustained over time. It became clear that their relationship had existed long before Laura suspected anything, stretching back into the early years of Mark's career. For Laura, the discovery was devastating. It meant that while she had been standing proudly beside him during his rise to fame, while she had built a home and dreamed of a future, Mark had already been entangled in something so deeply destructive. She had never stood a chance at the marriage she thought she had. From the very beginning, there had been lies, and every moment she cherished had been built on a foundation destined to crumble. Clara's disappearance only deepened the mystery. After the scandal broke, she vanished from public view, leaving no trace. The press speculated endlessly. Was she hiding out of shame, or had she fled because the truth about the money was too damning to face? Some suggested she had left the country entirely, supported by the very funds Mark had transferred to her. Others believed she had gone underground, terrified of the backlash that came from being linked to such a disgraceful secret. Whatever the truth, she was gone, leaving Mark to face the wreckage alone. Mark himself spiraled. Stripped of his career, abandoned by sponsors, and rejected by his own club, he retreated from the spotlight. For a man who had thrived on applause, the silence was unbearable. His attempts to defend himself fell flat. Every word he spoke sounded hollow against the mountain of evidence Laura had exposed. Legal investigations lingered over him, not for the affair itself, but for the financial dealings surrounding it. Questions arose about fraud, about undeclared payments, about how deep the deception ran. The man once hailed as a national hero was now a disgraced figure, unable to step outside without facing jeers and condemnation. Laura, watching from a distance, felt both vindicated and hollow. She had succeeded in exposing the truth, but the victory came with no joy. Her life had been shattered alongside his. The home they had built together was gone, replaced with the quiet solitude of starting over. She no longer had to live under the shadow of suspicion, but she carried scars that would never fully heal. The betrayal had cut too deep, not only because of the affair, but because of who it had been with. It was a violation of every trust, every boundary she had believed in. The story, replayed endlessly on television, became more than just a scandal. It turned into a cautionary tale. Analysts discussed it as an example of how fame could corrupt, how obsession and secrecy could destroy lives. Families whispered about it in their living rooms, shaking their heads at the thought of how far it had gone. It wasn't just about a footballer's fall from grace anymore. It was about the dangers of unchecked power, hidden secrets, and the devastating cost of betrayal. In the end, Mark was left with nothing but the ruins of his once celebrated life. Clara remained a ghost in the background, a figure tied forever to his downfall. And Laura, though scarred, emerged as the one who had refused to stay silent. She had been the voice that dragged the truth into the light, no matter how painful it was. The perfect marriage the world had admired was revealed to be nothing more than a facade, and the shocking secret behind it ensured that the story would not be forgotten. That it was a reminder that no matter how perfect something looks from the outside, shadows can linger beneath the surface. And when those shadows finally emerge, they can destroy everything in their path.